It's the Growing for Market podcast.
So there's a woman who has a preschool in the area, and she comes every Tuesday morning with her preschool kids. There's usually like a line of 5 of them, and they pull up and they're like, "Hi, Farmer Angela." And they come through and they buy their kale and they go feed the goats, and they go home and they make kale chips and they eat them together every Tuesday from June to October. And those kids come with their parents and this is my farmer. And that's just one little story, but that I think it lives really large in people's imagination, but in people's hearts as they go on. And they're like, no, I had this experience of eating real food and knowing where it came from. And it's really deep in people's lived experience as they go from that and our hope of continuing to be sustainable food providers in this community. So that kind of continues to drive my passion for it and my hope as people engage with the farm, for sure.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Katie Kula, your host and a writer for Growing for Market magazine. For 32 years, the only magazine devoted solely to flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouses team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit rimmel.com to get a quote today. Your soil is your most steadfast partner, an asset worthy of investing in. Since 1972, Ohio Earth Food has been the go-to source for high-performing and cost-effective granular and liquid fertilizers, seed-starting soils, and foliar sprays, all approved for use on organic farms. They deliver them right to your farm, too. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil with mycorrhizae and put their Revita fertilizers in the soil before you plant. And rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. These natural blends utilize compost, kelp, and humates and are low salt index safe for high tunnels. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. Now with branches in Ohio and Wisconsin. ohioearthfood.com.
Hello, everybody. I am talking today with Angela and Paul Neufeld. They have been farming in Surrey, British Columbia for 18 years. As Kingfisher Farm Market, they have been committed to regenerative, sustainable farming practices from the beginning. They've been slowly building up their farm business on land they share with other families. In a recent newsletter, Angela shared that in 2014, so 9 years ago, they made $977.50. Fast forward to 2023, this most recent season, and they made their main livelihood off the farm. They now host a bustling one-day-a-week market at the farm, as well as roadside sales throughout the week with a few restaurants that they supply with weekly lettuce mix and other veggies. They also sell flower bouquets from April to October at their roadside stand, market, weekly flower subscriptions, and through their DIY buckets. Presumably people make their own bouquets. Pretty fun. I'm excited to talk with Angela and Paul today about the organic growth of their farm, living and farming in community, and their many marketing outlets. So thank you two for joining me on the podcast today.
You bet.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. I spent some time reading around your website, your newsletter, Instagram, It sounds like there's been a long, slow evolution to Kingfisher Farm Market being what it is today. Can you share your farm's story with us and our audience?
Yeah, I would love to. Well, neither Angela nor I grew up farming. So going way back, we were both city people who found ourselves to farming vocation. And so I think we share a lot in common in that sense with many new farmers these days who probably like us wish that they had more of a background and family mentors to have learned it from. Growing up, my dad grew up on the farm, and we would, as a kid, spend time in the summer on my grandparents' properties. My opa grew, hundreds of acres of field crops and large barns of broilers. My uncles continue that today. And the scale has moved from hundreds to thousands of acres. And when I would visit the farm as a kid, I loved the landscape. I loved that place. But it was the family food garden that I was drawn to. I couldn't imagine, I didn't see myself in that large scale landscape with massive equipment and investments. But I loved, wandering the rows in the food garden and helping pick and shell beans and peas and that sort of thing. And my grandparents were always really generous. That was not their livelihood, the food garden, but it was the place where they could just share. It felt abundant, and everybody who came to visit would take things home with them. So that felt like, that's sort of what inspired me to move into food production. And so I guess at the beginning, I had more of that kind of homesteader subsistence mindset towards what farming was about. And I certainly didn't know of people in the market gardening space. Like farming, growing vegetables as a business just wasn't on my radar. Farmers were big. Farmers were thousands of acres. That's what constituted farming for me. Fast forward to, we moved to the West Coast, to Vancouver in 2000, and I started to get to know the neighborhood we lived in, an older neighborhood with a lot of Italian and Chinese immigrant families. And I'd wander the back alleys of the neighborhood and pause to look in over people's fences at their food gardens. And some of these, mostly they were attended by seniors, and many of them were growing like really intensive year-round food gardens. And I didn't know that was possible. Growing up where there's a hard freeze and nothing grows for months of the year, to see a year-round food garden that people are out there tending and harvesting out of in the winter was super inspiring to me. To see the level of production that people got out of little urban backyard plots was like, oh, this really awakened my imagination. And I started to try to imagine myself there. We were loving living in the city, and there wasn't a lot of urban farming in terms of like productive urban farms that people were making a living from. So I didn't know how to enter that space. But sometime around, I kind of working towards that goal, I spent a year at a local college doing a horticulture program that was geared more towards kind of nursery, greenhouse, ornamentals. Through that experience, I discovered, well, I don't really want to stay in ornamental production and landscape, tending landscapes in that way. But the program did have useful content for me that I've taken from that. Plant propagation, botany, and soils. That's been helpful. And it helped me kind of clarify, I really do want to work in the food space. Yeah, so it was around 2004. There was a group of folks who were setting up a nonprofit organization in the Metro Vancouver area called Arasha Canada. It's a faith-based nonprofit, and they were trying to acquire a property in the area. They found a 10-acre property in Surrey that they were going to set up like an environmental center at. So Arasha does work in conservation, habitat conservation, and environmental education. And so I knew some folks. I was getting familiar with what they were up to. And this property had a space that looked like an ideal garden site. And they were talking about maybe doing a little CSA. So I said, I kind of timidly said, well, when you hire somebody to run that part of what you're doing, tell them to give me a call. I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to learn. And that led to me being recruited to be the person.
I was thinking that's where we were going with this. You're like, I'll help. And they were like, How about you really help?
Yes, totally. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and I really didn't. I mean, the good thing was they were small. They didn't have resources to hire somebody full time, and I wasn't prepared to like move to Surrey and be a full time farmer either. So it was a good fit. It was a commute. We had small kids at home, so I worked part time. Angela worked part time in the city, and I managed to kind of get my foot in the door and learn that way slowly over time.
Can I ask a quick question? So, for people who aren't familiar with geography in Canada or the greater Vancouver area, how far away is Surrey from the city? Like, what are we looking at with your commute here?
Just a 45-minute drive, but you often took the bus, like maybe an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant commute.
He would stay overnight one night.
Okay.
So then it would kind of... Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which, of course, I mean, that makes sense. Vancouver is a huge city. So it has to be a certain amount of time to be outside of that on 10 acres.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Surrey is quite urban as well. But unlike Vancouver's kind of hemmed in by mountains and the ocean. So there's not farm space within the city of Vancouver. But the surrounding communities, especially Surrey, has a fair bit of farmland within it. And
not to say that people aren't farming within Vancouver, like doing like
urban
market, urban farming.
For sure. But actual farmland, Surrey has quite a bit of it alongside a fairly growing population of residents. So we're kind of in that rural urban fringe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we farm on land that has been farmed for a long time, but we're right adjacent to a fairly dense subdivision in Surrey. So, yeah.
Which wasn't there when you began farming.
Right. Yeah. When Arasha first acquired the property, the land surrounding the farm was small acreages, 1 acre or half acre properties. And that area was totally cleared, and really dense housing began to be built around 2010 when we moved here.
Maybe this would be an okay time to say, like, this, we also like humbly farm this land that is not really ours and is Coast Salish people, Semiahmoo First Nation, unceded territory. So that's something we hold in the mix there.
Yes, thank you. So that's the same land you are still on today, but So how has that evolved? Because now it's your farm, right? Like you're not farming as part of this organization?
We're proud to be together here.
Yeah. I continued to work for Arasha as the farm manager until just 3 years ago. But in 2010, Arasha actually transitioned from the property that we're on to another nearby that was larger, had some other larger buildings on it. So it was better suited to what they were up to. And we immediately started transitioning pasture spaces there to garden spaces and expanding, growing the CSA. That's around the time that I began full-time with Arasha as the farm manager. And, our CSA program grew from like 30 people to 150 people within a few years. And
so you were farming here and then at the new
so
site.
Arasha leased an acre of land from us, from the folks who had purchased this property together.
Ooh, we skipped that. So then when Arasha moved over, they were like, this is a really amazing piece of land. It's close to our hearts. We'd like to kind of keep this in the family. And so there was a number of us families that gathered together, and we were invited to be a part of that and said, let's purchase this land, co-own this land.
Property is too expensive in this area for people like us to just purchase a 10-acre piece was totally unattainable. So we had to work together with others to make that possible.
It really wasn't on our radar even to buy a farm or to even move out to farmland. But we started discerning with these people and just felt there was such a goodness and a trust that was built up, and our hearts just kept saying yes. And we moved out.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Arasha's now on this other land, but you're still managing their CSA at that point? Or?
I continued to do that. Yeah. So we could.
Yeah, I guess. And then around 2012, when our family moved to South Surrey and Paul continued to farm at both sites, I was out here, and then I felt like a market would be a really great way to connect. I think our vision is often around community and how to connect with people and land, and then seeing all these people drive past our farm and move into the neighborhood, and we're like, we're your neighborhood farm. So we began this little market, and we were under a market tent on the lawn. And I have these little notebooks from that time. And like back in 2012, it says, well, we only sold $200 of veggies, but I think it was worth the day. We had some great conversations. And I'm like, ooh, I'm really glad it grew from that. But yeah, it was a pretty different scale. But often there was one young guy that would come at the end of every Tuesday. And he was like, well, just load up whatever you got left. And we're like, woo. It's like, I feel like through those first years, there was always like farm patrons that were kind of helping us through and like passionate about local agriculture and supporting local. But we were so grateful for them.
He would buy like 6 bunches of kale in one go.
Yeah.
He'd buy half the kale we had for sale that day. I think it's also worth saying when the neighborhood was being built, it was obvious that they weren't putting in park space wasn't a high priority at first. There is a park there now. There's also a school there now, but that didn't exist at the start. And people's lots were tiny. So we really felt like people could walk to our farm and walk onto our yard. We could be a place of a green space for the community as well. And a few years in, 2 or 3 years in, we also started a little community garden in the corner of our property, which has continued to this day. We've got about 25 plots there. Just as a place for people to come and get their hands in the soil.
Yeah, that's great. So that's local people sign up and have their allotment on your property of sorts. Oh, that's really a sweet thing.
Over the years, I've tried to like make sure that it's people within walking distance, because that's my focus at this point. And
well, it sounds like there's plenty of people within walking distance from what you're describing. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Every fall on our farm, we order a couple sling bags of Fort V potting soil from Vermont Compost. Over the years, we've tried a lot of the compost and potting soil options out there, from making our own to buying off the shelf. And we keep coming back to Vermont Compost, both for overall quality and batch-to-batch consistency. It's that consistency that keeps us coming back. There are so many variables that affect how good your seedlings are. We know Vermont Compost will give our plants the best possible foundation, so we can stick to worrying about all the other stuff and not the potting soil. Visit vermontcompost.com/GFM for more details. I am so excited to welcome Bootstrap Farmer as a sponsor of the podcast. I've known them for a dozen years, and if anyone tells you nothing is made in the USA anymore, well, they're headquartered and warehoused in Paris, Texas. They make their own all-metal, all-inclusive greenhouse frames of steel made in the USA and fabricated in Texas, and their heavy-duty, reusable propagation and microgreens trays are Midwest-made. With a complete range of supplies, they have just about everything for propagation and growing, including heat mats, ground cover, frost blankets, silage tarps, irrigation, and trellising. Want to color code your seed starting flats? They've got heavy-duty trays that will last for years in a full range of colors, great for keeping farm seedlings separate from retail or just for fun. And they have an experienced team of growers to support everything they sell. If you've heard of the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative providing grants for hoop houses, but have been put off by the paperwork, Bootstrap Farmer has a guide that will walk you through the application process so you can get your hoop house funded this winter. For all that and more, check out Bootstrap Farmer at bootstrapfarmer.com.
And now back to the show. Let's take it to today. At some point, you started really growing what you are doing on that property, it sounds like. From what I see, what you have going now, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, it was around the 2020 growing season. I started to feel like I was ready to transition to farming on one property.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. At some point during that season, I let Arasha know that would be my last growing season. And we started to kind of put plans in place for, okay, well, how will this look when we're doing it on our own on 1 acre?
I think it felt like we had been reluctant to kind of jump into it. I mean, it's a huge step to farming with Arasha. He was farming with a salary, a small salary, but it went like, that's kind of a unique farming situation, right? So we had the gift of having years to build up the market and the customer base and the community
with less risk.
And that's huge. I know that was a gift. And so in 2020 or 2021, being able to launch like our own business at that point with already having established customer base and stuff, that didn't feel as insecure. And we felt, well, we knew that we could make a go of it. And then with COVID, it was actually a really good go of it because people they were present to local farms and to being local and had time to make food. And
yeah, everyone was cooking.
First season.
Everyone was cooking, and people were nervous to go into an enclosed grocery store, but going to a farm market where you're outside felt safe to people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually a spike in our business that we weren't anticipating, but it was a nice way to start.
Yeah. It did test our relationship, and it was different from Paul having another job and like kind of running the market together. But this was an added financial insecurity, which was stressful.
Running a business.
Yeah, it upped the ante for like our work together and then, being together in that. And it was way more steep learning curve than I thought around financial management and business 101 that I had never taken. So, yeah.
Okay. I want to jump around the questions I sent you a little bit just because this seems like a good next question. So, as far as your different marketing outlets, you have this farm market you run. Let's talk a little bit about that because it sounds like you started that even before you scaled up your own farm. And kind of like, it sounds like a real amazing blessing for this community that's grown up around you. Can you tell us more about that piece of the puzzle and how you cooperate with other producers and growers and what it looks like today? Is it still just one booth that you put out one day a week, or has it grown? Let's hear about what it is today.
It remains one day of the week.
Yeah, we're just Tuesday markets. That's our thing. But we've moved inside. There's like a 90-year-old barn, which has lots of ambiance and little foundation, but it serves the purpose for hosting this market space. So it's one of the things people enjoy about coming to the market for sure. So it's at this point we're 11 to 6 on that Tuesday, and usually by 10:30 during like especially July, August, September, there's lineups waiting to get into the barn, and parking is tight. That is our biggest constraint.
Yeah, we have one person just managing parking and directing traffic for about 2 hours every Tuesday.
Maybe like my big vision or my deepest hope for the market is that this neighborhood would like walk down. But while there's many people that walk down and many people from the neighborhood that come, they're not the bulk of our people. It's wider for sure.
And people are definitely oriented. I mean, we are too. There's not a lot of places you can walk to in this area. So people are just used to getting in their cars and driving places. And yeah, we're one more stop on their errands, right?
Yeah.
So is it like a traditional farmer's market where other people come and vend, or are you like reselling products from a lot of people or consigning products from a lot of people?
So we have both. Like in the main barn area, it's like 80% are veggies. And then we get in some other veggies we work with another organic grower in the area. And that provides like, if we can't do broccoli every week, there's broccoli or things like that. And then we get in meat and cheese, eggs and honey and bread from local businesses. And then I invite a couple of vendors each week, and they're kind of set out a little bit closer to the parking area. So as you walk, you'll encounter them, local makers or
not farm vendors.
Right.
Okay.
They're like doing either preserves or pottery.
So more of the craft piece of what you might see at a market. Okay.
I love that market vibe, and I love ways to support either like young entrepreneurs or
small businesses.
So we've kind of, and each of those people come a couple times this summer. So there's like continuity in who they'll see, and they get to know our community and customer base. So yeah, people come. So then our like market tills are kind of outside the barn, because the barn it just really fills up over the season. So there's this wonderful spread, like colorful tablecloths and baskets and flowers. And then after people come through the till, there's a couple bins of greens, and people can go feed the goats, which is also a huge draw.
Sweet.
It's not like a petting zoo style, but they are tourist goats, and they are well loved, especially by the kids. Not just the kids, though. Some adults come just for the goats, I think.
Probably, yeah.
Adults also like animals, it turns out.
So at this point, we don't have chickens or ducks as we used to, but we have the goats. And
we used to have cows, but we replaced them with goats, which is a better fit for our property scale wise. And we're fairly wet in winter, so goats just are so much lighter on their feet.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of, we do. Yeah. It's a lot of setup for a 1 day a week market, but we get around 600 people.
Oh my goodness.
A day.
Wow. That's really phenomenal turnout for what's basically one farm market plus, right? Like you have other things, but it's not like a farmer's market where you might have 10 different farmers. That's excellent.
Yeah. So it's been enough for us to go like, okay, this is a long day, but it seems, it's worth it. And there's so much appreciation for it. And we also really love connecting to the people who are eating the food that we grow. So even though that's like, there's a certain toll on like for that whole customer thing, but it's also a huge gift to hear from people who are like trying the things that you're growing and learning new things. And yeah.
And is that the primary occasion where you have direct interaction with your customer base each week?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
You also have a roadside stand. Is that a self-serve style farm stand that you keep stocked?
Yeah, that's an honor system.
Okay.
We load it up on Wednesday morning.
Oh, so maybe you start with some leftovers from Tuesday as part of it?
Yeah,
I see.
Okay. Yeah, Wednesday morning it gets loaded up, and we kind of put a special effort into keeping it stocked, especially over the weekend when it's getting further from the Tuesday market. But there's folks that come and buy stuff at our roadside stand who probably never come into the market on Tuesdays. And then there's other people who come to the market on Tuesdays and stop 2 or 3 times during the week to pick up extra things. And that seems to work. There's a little cash box that people can drop money into. But I would say at this point, about half of the sales from that are by e-transfer.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, people don't carry a lot of cash these days. And so that works out well. We've kind of dreamed if there was a way. Venmo isn't a thing in Canada.
I was going to say,
what's
e-transfer? Venmo would be the farmer's choice down here, probably.
Yeah. So we don't have Venmo, but people send e-transfers directly to our bank account. We wish that there was some kind of simple app or something that people could scan.
Yeah, like a QR code. You don't have.
Yeah, the technology isn't there for us quite yet, and
or the money.
The
technology is probably there, but
yeah. Anyway, but it's this year our sales at the roadside, we recorded about just over $40,000 of sales at the roadside. Yeah, we know that we probably have some losses. Like we record the roadside sales as a customer on our square till. So when we stick things out there, roadside is the customer, and we put that into our square just so we can keep track of what's going out. Some things don't maintain their quality if they're sitting out at the road. So we try and call and, pull things off, but they don't always get refunded. So we know there's a bit of a gray area. It's really hard to reconcile.
And sometimes we're going to transfer a couple weeks later. Oh, this was for the veggies. So I'm not doing like daily reconciliation with that. So there is this ebb and flow and honor system. Right.
There might be some kale walking out there that you never get paid for. I will always say, unless you're getting too much of that, we used to have like checks bounce at market, and it was like, I guess they really needed the kale. It was hard to feel like I wasn't going to go. Would be different if it was jeopardizing our whole livelihood. But a few items here and there for vegetables, it was hard to feel too bad. Like they needed that vegetables. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
Totally.
With the farm stand, do you have any like reach-in coolers, or is it just open?
We have a tent over top. Like we have two kind of what do you call those? I don't know, stands and tent over top. But then when we started selling lettuce mix in the bags, that was a way that we could have greens at the roadside, because
lettuce heads would wilt after a couple of months out there.
The mini romaine is okay, but the bigger heads, not so much. But the lettuce mix, every day we stock that 3 or 4 times a day. So people are picking up the bags of lettuce mix all the time. So there's not, even on hot days, it goes so quickly that it's not a concern.
So do you pre-harvest that and have that sort of bagged up in a walk-in or reach-in cooler that you have elsewhere, and you're just restocking?
Correct, yeah. So if it's coming out of the cooler cold, that helps, and it helps its longevity at the road. But there isn't the same diversity at the roadside there would be on a Tuesday market. There's some things that just don't work to do that with. So it's a smaller selection, a more limited selection.
And we never usually have like leftover broccoli from a Tuesday market to be able to harvest. And it makes more sense for us to save that for another Tuesday and have the variety than that to go to the roadside stand. So there's some things that don't make it to the roadside stand.
Mm-hmm.
But, stuff like zucchini and cucumbers and some limited greens, tomatoes and peppers, those sorts of things work well at the road. Probably the disadvantage to running a roadside system is that it's always in the back of your mind. It takes up some mental space that you gotta be checking it regularly and not neglecting it. And the more consistent you are, the more likely it's going to succeed. Because if you do neglect it for a day and people come by and they see a bunch of stuff that looks kind of iffy and wilted, they're not going to stop again, or they're going to think of it as my number 2 choice, not my number 1 choice to stop at. So we don't have to have an employee there, which is fantastic that we're not paying somebody to be our cashier at the road. There's a real savings there, but it has a toll in terms of it's always on our mind.
Yeah.
It's not easy to put it away.
Do you take any days off? So I know it makes sense to keep it stocked through the weekend, but do you kind of let it go on Monday, or do you actually think about it every single day?
Monday, we tend unless there's like a ton of stuff that we still feel like we need to get rid of, we tend to slack off. And sometimes we close it all together on, Sunday night, we're done.
Okay, that makes sense. Because then you're preparing for the Tuesday market, presumably.
Yeah, we just need to focus. And we're going to try to do a better job this year my parents often, they're here on site too. So they would, if we went for like a day on a weekend, then they would take over the roadside stand. But this year we're going to do a better job of just kind of rotating it between staff as well, and being like, okay, this is your weekend on or your day on, because we just realized that we probably need a bit more of a break from that. It helped this year, obviously, in the stats that we pushed through and did it every weekend because it was selling and we had the stuff to sell. But we want to take a few more weekends off this year.
Yeah, that's part of the sustainability puzzle, right? Is making sure that your business works with your personal needs too. And so you told us how much you were making off of the roadside stand. So how does that fit in with the bigger puzzle of like the farm market and the restaurant sales?
That's about 20% of our total sales.
Okay.
And I should say, actually, for the roadside, we sell more flowers at the roadside than at our regular Tuesday market. And probably of that 40,000 total, almost half of that, or maybe more than half of that, is flowers.
Yeah.
So it's people driving by and picking up a bouquet is a big part of the roadside success.
Well, and my experience with flowers is you can charge a lot more for a bouquet than for a bunch of kale too. So
true that.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. I wanted to ask you about flowers. Was this always part of your vision in terms of your farm to grow food and flowers, or how did that come into the mix? And what all are you growing? It sounds like there's a lot going on. Let's talk about that. We'll start there. What all are you growing?
Okay. I'll let Paul start with the veggies.
Okay. Well, we grow most of the typical vegetable and herb crops that can be grown in this climate. We don't grow potatoes and we don't grow corn because those are ones that are easy for us to source from another local farm that grows them. We basically can get potatoes every week of our season from other farmers. And it isn't, for whatever reason, it's not one that I felt particularly good at. So we skipped, there's a few other, minor vegetables, maybe I should call them, that are like, there's a few people that love them, but most people could take or leave them. Parsnips, rutabaga. Those ones have some serious fans, but most people will walk by them and not bother. Celeriac is another one. But, every once in a while, I let things stay in the crop plan because I like growing them. So, tomatillos are not a big seller, but I kind of like them.
Yeah.
So I keep them in there. I grow a little patch of tomatillos just for my own joy.
And every year for a couple of weeks, we do like salsa verde kits. And there's some people who wouldn't buy them if we don't have the little kits that they can pick up and make.
Like a brown paper bag with, cilantro, a pepper, some garlic and an onion. And
they love that.
And a bunch of tomatillos.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you don't have a CSA on your farm, right? So it's not, because right, you're just doing the market and the roadside stand, or do you also do a CSA?
We have a little farmer's box, we call it, that we do on Fridays out to Crescent Beach, which is kind of a adjacent neighborhood.
But it's a smaller chunk of your overall. Yeah. I think of some of those specialty crops as things that we do to like add spice to a CSA box. But yeah, you're right. Like the average market goer, parsnips,
not so much.
They would rather have winter squash. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In terms of our top crops, if I could put it that way, greens are number one.
Yeah.
Like lettuce mix.
Yeah, well, greens overall are definitely number one. Lettuce mix is our best seller of everything that we grow. So we just do like a Salanova style kind of cut lettuce mix. It's washed, it's dried, and bagged up in 170 gram portions. And that's definitely oversold everything else. I was surprised. The first year, tomatoes and lettuce mix were kind of neck and neck. But ever since our first, like the last 2 years, lettuce mix has definitely edged out tomatoes. So tomatoes would be number two. And I think I'm guessing that's common for a lot of direct-to-market farms, that, tomatoes is what brings people in.
No, you're shaking your head.
Okay. No, so let's do a little funny interjection here. So I first farmed in Bellingham, Washington, which is just south of where you are. Yeah. And in North Whatcom County. So I was very close to you. And tomatoes were huge for us too. Are you growing them in a greenhouse?
Yeah.
Unheated.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. An unheated high tunnel or such. Okay. We moved to the Willamette Valley, which is farther south. You can hardly give away tomatoes down here.
Right.
Because everybody can grow them outside in their gardens. So
yeah, they're easy.
It's not to say we don't sell them, and our CSA loves them, etc. But our first year at market, we brought these beautiful tomatoes, and we thought, yeah, here we go, money makers. And people were like, yeah, I have tomatoes. So that's great. These are these kind of regional differences, right? That not just in how we can grow, but in what our market's going to be interested in. So, and also maybe the other difference is a lot of people where I live garden.
Right.
So,
yeah, a lot. There's not that same scenario here for sure. There's a lot of people who are coming in for their tomato and their bread, right? And they're like, they know they want a tomato during summer. And as soon as tomatoes start producing, our market sales, like the amount of people coming in goes way up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love a bread and a tomato. Sounds like a great meal to me.
Fair,
It just made me hungry. Okay. So number one, greens. Number two, tomatoes. What else do you guys really love growing?
In terms of like sales volume, number three is carrots. I don't feel like we're great carrot growers. It's something I aspire to be better at, but everybody buys carrots. Beets are easier to grow, but people don't buy beets every week, but they'll buy carrots every single week of the season if it's available.
What type of carrots do you guys like to grow?
Nance carrots, like Yaya and Bolero.
And the secret is the grocery stores don't have those.
True.
Yeah.
So your carrots probably taste so much better than anything else they could get.
We have an employee who grew a big garden in Alberta, other side of the Rocky Mountains. And they're like, yeah, your carrots are okay, but they're not as sweet as Alberta carrots. I'm like, yeah, because we don't get that fast. But whatever, if they're fresh from the ground and they're crunchy, people are going to love them. And they'll buy as many as we can grow, basically.
Yeah, we never have enough.
And so how did the flowers come into all of it? Was that always part of the vision, or did you shift to thinking about that as a complementary product?
I actually can't quite remember, but I know that I started growing zinnias and maybe cosmos, but I remember I had these bouquets. I was so proud of them, or like 9 zinnias together in a bunch in this little jar. And I mean, it's so colorful and stunning, right? But now when I look at my bouquets and the variation and fullness, it's just kind of funny. Like I would never give just 9 blooms together.
9 zinnias, yeah.
I think I wonder maybe, and they were $5, right? Everything was $5, which I assume, and I would never double my lettuce price over like year by year, but with flowers, I had a lot of catching up to do to be able to sell them at actual market value.
And they're still much less expensive than if you'd go into an urban florist shop.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think I loved playing with the color, and I realized I felt there was a part of me that's like, oh man, of course, Paul does the veggies, I do the flowers. This is so ridiculous.
Stereotype.
It's a stereotype. But I really liked it. And Paul he could kind of like coach me in the how to, like we were ahead of things in being able to implement how to cut flowers on the larger scale, because we had the infrastructure already for growing. And then we just started, of course, with Floret Farm. They gave so much free information that there was lots to glean out there. And I just started kind of really honing the market bouquet. And that's really what I grow. So I don't grow especially for florists or for bunches or even for DIY buckets. Like my main thing is market bouquets. So I make sure that I have some kind of herb every week to go into the bouquet, and some kind of greenery and the air. Like there's all those different pieces. And when it all aligns in the weather and the succession planning in this Excel spreadsheet, it's worked. And it's been that there's enough of each thing that I usually have 3 recipes each week that I kind of work from. And so we have these 3 designs that we can move through and offer people on market days and then on the weekends as well. So people know they get flowers on Tuesdays, and then throughout the weekend I'll have fresh flowers. So I have 2 main harvest days and 2 design days. There can be special orders in there, but over the years I've really tried to keep it to, I'm not just, this sunflower looks like it's ready, I should harvest this one. I'm really trying to keep it to those harvest days to be efficient in that.
Right, to have the production commercial approach. So it sounds like the delegation, you're doing more of the flowers. What other kinds of pieces are you delegating? I didn't ask this question ahead of time. I'm just curious. I am always curious, when you have a couple or people who have a relationship outside of the farm, how do you think about the delegation and make sure everybody's happy at the end of the day?
Yeah. You do marketing, is Angela, newsletters and Instagram, and
market management.
Maybe. Yeah, managing the market and even communicating with customers, like email inquiries land in your inbox, not in mine. For the most part, I'm managing like field growing,
infrastructure, like irrigation.
Yeah, irrigation and weed control and those sorts of things. That's sort of more my place, managing hoop houses and such.
And do you have employees, presumably with the kind of numbers you're talking about? You have people out there helping with harvest and things?
We have about the equivalent of 4 full-time people, and then volunteers like my parents and a few other people coming alongside us. So, but most of those full-time hours, or like, so that'd be about 120 hours a week of paid help during the market season, and then less during like spring and winter. But those are done by a number of different people, not just like 40 hours a week.
Yeah, we're the only full-time farm people. Yep. Other employees, mostly by their preference, are doing part-time hours, 2 to 4 days a week kind of positions.
Mm-hmm. I didn't ask this earlier, but I'm always curious too. So for people who aren't familiar with the region, can you tell us a little bit about the climate and the soil where you are and how that, I know you close down for the winter, but you don't get super, super cold. So there's must be other things sort of affecting the cycle of your season.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're right by the ocean. We're about, if we were walking, we could walk to the ocean in about 10 or 15 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, we're right next to the border, like 5-minute walk to the actual border crossing to Washington State. So our climate is quite moderate. We don't get a lot of heavy, prolonged winter freezes. And where we are in the region, like within the Metro Vancouver area, we get about 20% more sunny days than, say, the city of Vancouver does. So for whatever reason, just the microclimate that we're in,
yeah,
this area of South Surrey and White Rock is kind of a bit of a sunny belt. At the same time, we're a little cooler because of our proximity to the ocean. So, if you go to a farm that's like in the Fraser Valley, about a 45-minute drive from us, they would have several degrees more heat on most summer days than we would. So we're just generally more moderate. We somehow managed to grow a few things that love heat. Like I love growing peppers, so I keep those in, and I love trying to grow some melons, and they do okay for us. But that requires extra effort and dedication to be able to get those things to grow well when you're in a moderate coastal climate.
Rain.
Yeah, our soils we're a loam, so kind of equal sand, silt, clay. The texture of our soil and kind of there's a bit of an underlying compaction. I think probably, during the Ice Age, a glacier just parked on our property and sat there, a mile and a half of ice deep, just sat there for a while. Because if you go down about 12 inches, it's like a hard pan there, and it's not a plow pan. It's just naturally a compaction layer that's further down. So water infiltrates fairly slowly. In wintertime, we get standing water. There's a really high water table. So that affects our ability to grow crops in winter.
Okay. So it's not the cold, it's the wet.
It's the wet, yeah. I still have a couple of beds of Salanova lettuce in the field that parts of the bed are probably drowning now, but kind of the higher end of one of the fields, I'm still harvesting out of that, and I've got a restaurant that I've kept on supplying. But we can't do that at great volume. It's just like this restaurant is a super loyal customer. And so it's almost like a little reward that we can tag on a few more weeks for them because they've been such a great partner to work with.
And in case somebody, I don't know when we'll run this, probably still in the winter, but in case somebody's listening in the future, we're talking in December right now. Yeah, definitely the wet, darkest month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of challenged myself last year to get lettuce to that restaurant until Christmas time, and I managed it. Last fall was a better season for that. It stayed sunnier and drier longer. This year, September, October, November have been much wetter and darker. So I'm surprised that I'm still getting lettuce out of it, but so far it's not super fun to harvest lettuce in winter. The fingers are cold. The water lines freeze sometimes, and we have to shut off the water for the wash station and then, turn it back on and then reach, dunking your hands into a big tank of cold water to unplug the drain. It's not my preferred mode, but it's kind of fun to challenge the limits there a little bit. But clearly we're not a 4-season farm.
Yeah, we've consciously decided that we would like to not be a 4-season farm and have the winter. I mean, in reality, it's not like we're sitting around for a couple of months, as like there's so many, there's planning tasks and stuff, but just like to not have time where we're pushing and where we're harvesting and growing intensely, it feels like a good rhythm for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a frost in October. So most years frost our kind of first frost date is usually later October, late end of October, and then our kind of last expected frost would be late March. I think we had frost further into the spring this year than most, but that's kind of our average. We get a lot of rainfall, but it all falls in winter. So summer's super dry. As you know, having farmed in the Bellingham area.
Well, and it's the same in Oregon too.
Yeah. It's very, in the prairies where I grew up, people often don't run any irrigation in summer because they reliably get water, water from the sky 2 or 3 times a week. That doesn't happen here. And people are kind of surprised because they think of the West Coast as a constant rain zone, but sometime in June it stops and it won't start again until October. So you can easily have 3 months of absolutely no precipitation, and you can't grow vegetables without any water. So irrigation is kind of essential here.
We have done some mitigation for the wetness, and this has been something where it's been such a gift to share the land with other farm mates, because we couldn't have done this kind of a land upgrade without collaboration with the whole farm community. But we did a wetland project that involved like swales and a series of ponds, helping to drain the farming area in a sustainable and slow way that still preserved and actually created more ecosystem, and especially for the western tree frogs and salamanders. So that's been a really exciting project. And
I tried in the early years when I was frustrated, because we often have to wait until almost into May before the fields dry out enough to really do a lot of work in them, which can be super frustrating when you want to be at the market early, but you just can't plant. So I called farm drainage experts, and I had a guy come out and he kind of laughed. He's like, I couldn't even get my equipment into your driveway. They do 40-acre or 80-acre properties with this big equipment that trenches and puts in big old pipe and drains things. And then we kind of fortuitously got in touch with a woman who's like a wetland biologist, and she started specializing in working with farms to design more natural drainage that incorporates wetlands into their farm. And she explained, we don't want to get the water off your farm entirely. We want to keep it
right.
on. You want that to infiltrate back into the ground, not
into the surface water, which is what I see a lot of people doing. That's not where it should go.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to send that water off your land as quickly as possible, because then it ends up negatively affecting your local waterways. We are right close to the Little Campbell River, which is kind of the watershed for our area. And it's tempting to try and get rid of that water and send it to the river where it can naturally drain to the ocean. But then you're getting rid of soil at the same time. And if it goes there as fast as possible, it can do a lot of damage to fish habitat. And that's not what we want. So yeah, she helped us we created ponds that actually create habitat instead of destroy habitat.
Beautiful. What a great project.
The kids from the farm, well, all of us, kids and adults, we planted the native plants together and saw that whole, and now tend them and cut invasives constantly and track there's one guy on the farm, he's always late spring, he's there rescuing tadpoles as the pond is going down. And
it's an ephemeral pond, it fills up in winter, and then by usually sometime in June it dries out completely.
We're listening for the tree frogs come mid-February. So it's become a really important part of our life together and our care for the ecosystem. And it feels like I wouldn't want to farm without that piece, but it would be hard for us, just the two of us, to really move that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the community aspect. So there's multiple families who bought this property. Mm-hmm. How many different households are on it? How do you cooperate? And I'm curious, how much of the 10 acres do you have in production? It sounds like you have this pond and there's obviously other households. How does that all work?
So there's 6 households that share and co-own this land. So we have a shared mortgage. We share land maintenance and care for the buildings together. We have weekly suppers together, and bi-weekly meetings. We live together we operate with consensus decision model making, and we each own a percentage of the land that we co-own. Each household has their own dwelling that is not shared. And so that's in the form of a duplex and the house that we live in and share. And that's called 2 residences that we are allowed on this agricultural land. And so those residences are shared.
Yeah, in terms of what the city zoning allows, I know of other kind of cooperative farms, and that's one of the challenges to be a cooperative farm if you're not like way off in a rural area where zoning requirements are pretty lax and, unenforced. If you're kind of farming in a closer to an urban area, zoning laws are often designed to prevent people from taking farmland and turning it into, recreational.
A subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
Subdivisions. Unfortunately, in our area, there's a lot of large, 3, 4, 5,000 square foot homes that are being built on farmland. But people that actually want to farm on farmland and realize that it takes a lot of people to run a small scale intensive farm have a hard time creating enough housing on site for all the people that would like to farm and live there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had to be a little bit creative to make it work, but yeah, somehow it does.
So then but not everybody that lives here farms with us. So that's another piece. And it's shifted a bit over the years, but everybody has their own careers or vocations other places. Some people farm with us. Paul and I own the farm business, and we do that within the context of this intentional community. So when we have an idea or a plan for something, we try to give lots of time that involves like land use or like an infrastructure that has, because the farm has quite a big impact on family life. And if that's
sure
family life, right? It's not a tidy business necessarily, right? So
yeah, they rarely are.
we do,
farms.
We try to propose this like with enough time for us to be able to process collectively and figure out and not push the agenda of a business which has a timeline, right? But we try to hold that.
We try to give lots of extra time, lead time when we're contemplating making a change or building something that we feel like we need for our business. We try and anticipate that and recognize that it's going to take a few weeks or maybe months of conversation.
Because other people have other visions, which may not have the pressure of my livelihood is depending on it, but I would really like to do this on this land. Or
we don't want our business to trump all other land use.
Yeah,
right.
So we try to hold that. And so the conversations, we hope, are spacious in that. And that can be tricky, but there's also a goodness in being able to have that constraint and work within those limits. And that is one of the reasons why we have a 1-day-a-week market, because we share this land with others. And not everybody wants to feel like they live in a business and have people looking in their windows. And because even if you have a sign, you have people, they're looking around, they're curious, feel like it's their farm.
It's a beautiful property. So people, when they come, they enjoy kind of the ambiance of it, not just the shopping experience. And, to have 5 people wandering around your yard more than 1 day a week, we've just felt like that would be too invasive.
Mm-hmm. And it would.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's shifted a bit over the years. So when we, back in 2011, it was 11 kids and 12 adults. And now there's only 3 youth still on site and everyone's gone. So the demographic has shifted. But back in the day, we had Weedy Wednesdays. And that was just an hour of weeding on Wednesday evenings for farm mates. And it could be not every Wednesday, but it could often be that there were 24 of us out there weeding a patch.
Oh my goodness.
Think about how much you can get weeded.
That's amazing.
Pretty cool.
I'm drooling.
It's not like that anymore. We miss that.
Oh, that just sounds like so much fun too for the kids, especially.
we kept that up for a long time. And I think it was only this year that we decided we needed to let it go. And, we think of it nostalgically now, but it was like, we came to the point where we're like, we need actually that evening off. There's not very many times off during the season. And to always be committed to being here on a Wednesday night just felt like, no, we got to let this one go.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was a good era, though.
It was.
Yeah. So looking to the future of your farm, I'm curious what you see as any potential ongoing or upcoming long-term challenges that to your business or to the land, and what kinds of things are you doing to meet those? This is the sustainability question. I'm always curious, because it's like we can do all these things, but there's still challenges from within and without with the farm business.
Well, I mean, as we've alluded to, sometimes it feels like we've kind of maxed out what we can sell on one Tuesday market a week. So we're thinking creatively through that. If we could spread out, being open for 7 hours, if we could spread out our customers over 7 hours, that would be lovely. But for some reason, people all like to come at the beginning of the market. And so the first 2 hours is the busiest portion. And that's why we have to have somebody directing traffic and assisting with parking. Otherwise, it could get out of control. But if we could take half of the people that like to arrive in the first 2 hours and move them to the end of the market, it would be lovely. But I don't know. We haven't figured out how to do that.
Like an incentive program or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Come late and you get a prize. I mean, they just don't want to miss out on all the good stuff, right?
It's true. Yeah. So, I mean, we try to communicate that we have stuff all the way to the end of the day, but it only takes one time of showing up at 5 o'clock and going, oh, the broccoli's sold out. Oh, darn, that you start to prioritize coming early.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had CSA members cry if they missed something. It's like, oh, people get really attached,
It's just broccoli.
Yeah.
But they're like, but I had my heart set on that broccoli.
Yeah. One of my recipe this week, our beautiful old barn is approaching 100 years old. It is a wooden structure that was built with a log foundation. So we've noticed in the last 10 years that it continually is shifting. And sometimes that, the floor doesn't feel very steady. Some of the floorboards are kind of springy, or there's gaps that develop unexpectedly. And so far, there's been no mishaps or accidents associated with this funky old structure. And people, as I said, people love the ambiance of the building, but we keep hoping that this is a big area for the film industry. And we keep hoping that, the next Marvel movie will want to use our barn or use the property and pay us $250,000 for the privilege.
In winter.
Yeah, in winter, not in summer.
Right, and then you can upgrade your barn.
Yeah, that would be the way to upgrade the barn. We've had people come in and look at it and go, this looks a little bit complicated. I don't know. And none of us we're not carpenters, or we're very minor carpenters, not barn upgrade carpenters.
Even better, maybe they'll come in and say, we'd like to use this barn, but do you mind if we do some upgrades first to make it safe? We'll keep the ambiance, but we'll make it safe for our crew. Okay, universe, we're putting it out there. That's what Kingfisher Farm Market needs.
Yeah, so far it hasn't happened.
Oh, shoot.
Aging bodies.
Yeah, in terms of sustainability, we realize farming on a small scale is labor, and we've both had injuries in the last couple of years that have affected our farming, and so we try in winter to put more time into.
We got a personal trainer last year, and we were doing weights and plank, and we felt so strong going into this season.
Yeah, that was great.
It was very well spent money.
Yeah.
Yeah, just acknowledging this is a physical job and we want to keep doing it. We want to just be delegating and we want to be strong in this farming, but also knowing that we have to build in a buffer, because last year when I broke my foot, by the end of the season, there were so many other people that had injuries because they were all compensating for me. We didn't have that buffer. Everyone just had to work harder. So that was great. That was a good wake-up call. Yeah.
I felt like we did. I mean, I had some back pain at some point during the season, and one of our farm mates is a massage therapist. So calling her for an emergency massage has been handy. Not that we want to take advantage of that, but it's nice to have somebody that you trust kind of on your team in terms of taking care of your body. I feel like we got through the season this year with less of a feeling of exhaustion and burnout.
Yeah.
I know that I feel like burnout is a reality for market farming, that people just get tired of the marathon of a season. So we definitely want to, and I don't think we're there yet, but we definitely want to structure our life in farming so that we're not getting to the end of a season feeling totally exhausted.
Well, even those small, like 24 hours, 48 hours away, we feel can be resets, like to breathe new air and and then to come back. So we took it, like, I think in June, it was the end of June, we went away, and it was huge. It just felt like then by the time we got talking, no, it's okay. We had that, this is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to take a week off or even like more than 4 days off at a time, but getting, for us, a long weekend that's like 3 days would be enough to kind of sustain us for a little longer,
Mm-hmm. Okay, so on the flip side, since our audience is market farmers or people who want to be, I'm curious. I always like to ask people what they think is the best thing they've done for their farm. I know that's kind of a trick question, like, what's your favorite color? But it is always interesting to me in the moment what people think of as like a specific, really useful thing that they've done, or a tool that they bought or something like that.
I think one important thing that we've discovered is that hiring people is helpful. Other people bring a lot of energy to your business. They add value to your business. Since being kind of our own thing, we hired a friend of ours he lives nearby, Ryan, and he has been with us now for all 3 of these seasons. And I feel like we really wouldn't be where we are today without him. He had some farm experience that he brought to it, and he's different from us, personality, and so he brings a perspective that can be helpful. He is able to manage some things kind of with more autonomy than somebody who's a total novice would, and he can contribute to some management conversations, and recognizing that if we're feeling worn out and like some tasks are piling up, it's better to just find somebody who can wash bins for an afternoon than to like stay up all hours and try and do it all ourselves. So yeah, spending a bit of money to get jobs done has been important for us. We can't do it all ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or we prefer not to do it all ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, you've shared how that we have a newsletter, and I think it's out there in farming talk how important those are, but it's really consistent. It's weekly. It's 7:15 on Saturday mornings, and people wait for it. They read it. I'm blown away constantly, and they feel connected to us. They're giving resources on recipes, which is that has made the difference between people trying veggies that they wouldn't normally cook with, or just walking through and like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to cook this week, or I guess I just need a lettuce mix, and it moves them past that. So that's been huge.
And they feel connected to our story as well. Like we talk about the things that are good and the things that are hard, the things that we're proud of and the things that didn't work so well. And I think people feel like they know a bit about what they're supporting.
And I saw that you also post those on your website.
Yeah, I tried to. I think this summer I wasn't quite as consistent, but I tried to cross-post them as well. But I try to encourage most people to be signed up, and then they get that right in there. Because I also have maybe a bit of an older demographic following. Yes, they're probably on Instagram, but they still read emails.
Right.
So that's just my demographic. It's worked really well.
Right.
And I don't have to rely on any algorithms.
Right. I think that's a really good point. I actually wrote an article about writing newsletters for Growing for Market a couple of years ago. And that was one of the things I talked about is, Yeah, it feels almost like old school, which is funny because we only had email newsletters not even that long, but it already feels kind of old school to be sending out an email newsletter. But like you're saying, it's yours. You put who's on the list, and if they open their email, assuming it doesn't go to their junk, they see it, which is just not true on any of the social media platforms right now. We have no guarantees that our posts will get put in front of our followers, and certainly not in a timely manner. Like, you want them to see that. Presumably you're kind of telling them what's going to be at the market on Tuesday, giving them ideas, getting them excited. So they need to see it before Tuesday. So that's great.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also is predictable, where a social media algorithm changes and all of a sudden you've got to adapt and like, oh, if I want people to see this, I got to start posting reels instead of photos. Oh, this is a new thing to learn. Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah. It seems like social media is maybe still a good way to get new customers, but not really for communicating with your existing customer base, right?
Yeah, I will say, I think my roadside customers, they engage with the social media. So in my stories, when I say, oh, I just did a new drop of flowers, I'll get responses right away, and people driving by and they're gone. So there's something about that. It's like, yeah, it's the first step in the connection, and the roadside stand is congruent with that. Like, it's that beginning entry. So it's definitely still valuable. I don't think it drives all my sales, but it definitely drives roadside sales for sure.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to share? It looks like you have a little list.
Well, the one thing you said, when you're asking what else we'd like to share,
yeah,
I would say it's been important for us to try and still enjoy cooking and being in the kitchen with the vegetables that we grow. Because farming is so all-encompassing, it would be very easy to kind of turn to prepared meals. But, if you've got all these amazing ingredients, what's the point of growing them if you can't enjoy them yourselves? So we try to carve out enough time for some home cooking throughout the season, and, preserving. And if we're hoping and that our customers are going to be able to do that, I feel like we need to kind of take responsibility to do that ourselves, and not fill our lives so full with being out in the field. As much as we love doing that, we farm because we enjoy it. But if it takes over all parts of our lives and we don't have time to sit down to a good meal that we've made ourselves, then what's the point?
Yeah. And then you can model for them. Look, we're busy and we do it.
Yeah. And we get it. We also buy prepared meals. So it's like, yeah, it's like this, and I don't know, and even better yet, I would like to share like the heart of it is when people come on site and feel like this land welcomes them. And so there's a woman who has a preschool in the area, and she comes every Tuesday morning with her preschool kids. There's usually like a line of 5 of them, and they pull up and they're like, "Hi, Farmer Angela." I'm like, "Oh, this is so cute." And they come through and they buy their kale and they go feed the goats, and then they come and they go home and they make kale chips and they eat them together every Tuesday from June to October. And those kids come with their parents and this is my farmer. And so that's just one little story, but that, I think, it lives really large in people's imagination, but in people's hearts as they go on. And they're like, no, I had this experience of eating real food and knowing where it came from. And it's really deep in people's lived experience as they go from that, and our hope of continuing to be sustainable food providers in this community. So that kind of continues to drive my passion for it and my hope as people engage with the farm, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Let's call that good. How can people reach you if they want to learn more? What are the best ways for them to find you on the web or social media?
Yeah, so they could do Instagram, Kingfisher Farm Market, all one word, and www.Kingfisher Farm Market is our website.
Yeah. Okay.
.com.
Great.
.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
We'll get those in the show notes too. Thank you, Angela and Paul, so much. It was so great to hear about your journey and your farm. I hope you guys have a great rest of your winter.
Thanks for reaching out, Katie.
Thank you.
Take care.
It was fun to talk.
Yeah, and all the best on your book.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can now try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine subscription for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never get billed. Even the most basic subscription gets you a year of the magazine, plus 150 back issues from the last 15 years. Digital subscriptions start at just $30 per year. So head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers for farmers in Growing for Market magazine.